it. All right, we are live. Yeah, I haven't done one of these in a while. Welcome back.
Thank you.
How are you?
I'm good. This is the final day that students are studying for the AP CSP exam.
Oh, yes, that's right. AP season is coming up. So the CSP is tomorrow, is it?
Yeah, so AP CSP is tomorrow, and that's what I spent this year making. So I am a little anxious.
And is this for Khan Academy, the materials you made, or is this independent?
This is for Khan Academy, yes.
Cool. And I have no idea about what this. I mean, I've heard about CSP, but I have, we probably took AP Computer Science around the same era. That was back in the C++ era, and they had the A and the AB exams. But yeah, I don't know anything about the CSP stuff at all.
So yeah, AP CSA has been around for a while, and it started off, I think, as Pascal, and then Plus, and now it's Java.
Yep.
And there is no computer science AB anymore.
Interesting.
And they created CSP just 3 years ago, and it already surpassed CSA in terms of popularity.
Yeah, it makes sense because it's more conceptual and more, socially relevant, it seems, right?
It's definitely very relevant. Yeah, it looks at a lot of aspects of computing. Like it looks at the ethics of computing innovations. It still involves a lot of programming. It's still about 50% programming.
Interesting. So it's 50%. So it's not right. So it's not just about computing concept. It's actually programming as well.
Yeah. So it does include computing. The difference is that it is up to the curriculum what programming language to use and what environment to use. So they need to learn the general concepts of variables and lists and repetition and Boolean logic.
So how are they tested then?
Yeah, this is the really interesting question, right? If you needed to test students about fundamental programming concepts and you had no idea what languages they were using, how would you do that? So they have a special pseudocode that they use for the exam, and there's a reference for that pseudocode that describes, what it represents. And it's really interesting because they had to make certain design decisions with the pseudocode because there are very few universals across all programming languages. I know this now because every time I was looking at some concept like variables or loops, I actually looked at the Wikipedia pages that compare them across languages to try and get a feel for the variation. So there aren't so many universals. And there's a few things that really throw people off. So for example, and this is going to anger some people, but in the pseudocode, lists start with the index of 1. And this has been very infuriating to some people because, those of us who've only used languages where the first index is 0, it feels almost wrong. Like, no, we spent this whole time, our whole life, learning that 0 is the first, and now you're going to,
learning to count from 0. Yes.
Yeah. But as it turns out, there actually are programming languages that start with the index of 1. That was actually the original. The first ones actually did. And there's even some modern ones that do. And Scratch and Snap both count from 1. So I think that's part of why they went with that decision.
Yeah, it makes sense. I mean, intuitively it makes sense for students as well. Yeah.
Well, you would think so, except that, if you spent the whole year trying to remember the fact that they started 0, and then, in order to make
sure, because you're learning whatever language, it's true. Like if
so for some of these students, they have not seen the pseudocode until the week before the exam.
Oh wow, that was confusing.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's really interesting, right? Trying to come up with a way to do that. But the nice thing is that means that, we have some CSP classes that teach in Python, quite a lot in JavaScript, because code.org is the dominant provider, and they use both the text-based and block-based JavaScript. But then there's also Scratch and Snap and all these different languages.
Code.org, they have an AP CSP curriculum?
Yeah, so CSP, there's all these endorsed curricula. So those curriculum involve both classroom, they involve classroom activities, assessments, lesson plans. Because the other interesting thing about CSP is that it actually says in the standards that collaboration is a part of the standards. So you have to, if you're teaching CSP, you have to specifically include collaboration, like pair programming, as part of your classroom. So that's actually really cool, right? Because a lot of people think of programming as this antisocial activity, but it's actually incredibly social and collaborative now, and it's hard to be successful if you don't have those skills.
Yeah, totally. And that's just the curriculum itself, right? I guess the exam doesn't have that collaborative component, I assume.
Right. So the exam doesn't have that. But if you are taking the exam, you have to be in a class which is using an endorsed curricula.
Oh, right? Interesting. So not anyone can just take the exam.
I don't believe so. I think your teacher would have to submit lesson plans to the site if they weren't using a standard one like AP, like code.org. And then they would have to approve it and say, okay, yeah, it does meet the standards.
That's interesting because a lot of AP tests, you technically don't have to take the class, or you just sign up for an AP test in biology. He's crammed for. I mean, not many people did that, but if some people were obsessed with taking all the AP tests, so they just like studied on their own. But I guess, yeah, that makes sense.
Right. This is actually more like studio art because in studio art, it's actually it's a portfolio. So for CSP, there's also a portfolio. So in addition to doing the exam, they submit a programming task with a video explanation of what they did. And they also submit a write-up about a computing innovation and the effects on society.
Oh, that's actually really neat. Yeah, the studio art model, that is really neat that they submit some original work. So it's kind of like, that is pretty cool. Yeah, I'm learning something new today.
Yeah, I mean, it makes things really tricky, but it also, it makes sense because computer science, computer programming is just such a hodgepodge of different types of skills. So we have the programming skill but we also have, have the ability to think about the effects of computing. And when we're doing computing, writing and communicating is actually a very useful skill. Collaborating is a very useful skill. All of these are really a part of it. So it's a pretty interesting course. I think it's neat that they came up with it.
Yeah, and do you have any idea about the college uptake of what credits those AP tests count for, and how significant do you think they? Why do people take them? I guess maybe why are students taking the AP CSP exam?
That's a good question. I would love to survey all the CSP students and find out why they're taking it. So they do college. So this is all College Board. So they would have the official response for this. They have a list of colleges that give some sort of credit for it. It's really varies based on the college. So some of them are going to give credit for it, but not necessarily substitute it for a class.
So just like general major credit or something, general computer science credit.
Yeah, well, for California, actually, it now counts as a science elective.
Oh, interesting. For colleges or for the high school?
Well, for the UC system.
So, okay.
So they've been working on that, so don't quote me on that, but there's been some interesting stuff there. So yeah, so the question is like, well, what college class does it represent? At most colleges, it probably doesn't represent a class. Right. But if you find a college that has a class like CS0 or CS1, these numbers vary, but like for Berkeley, CS10.
Yeah, it's like a CS 0.5 almost, right?
Yeah, I mean, CS0 just doesn't sound so good, but but some colleges are doing that, and that tends to be CS for non-majors. Yeah. And I think that seems to be growing at colleges because there's a lot of non-majors that want to have basic computer science understanding. So I think we'll increasingly see this at something like this at the college level in order to be able to share computer science with non-majors, potentially get some people interested in computer science that are going to switch, and then be able to keep the CS 101 classes focused on the folks that are really there for the major and want to go far.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, because the trend has been computing has been used in all the different majors, and yeah, the CS0 is a real thing. It's like a real kind of course, and like you said, it's the computing for non-majors course, and like different schools do it differently, but there are some CS majors who take CS0 and then CS1 because they didn't come in as prepared in terms of programming. Right. So it's a good on-ramp, and I think having these multiple on-ramps are important for, for diversity as well, right? For people
Right.
who didn't just grow up just hacking on computers. They're like, oh, this is interesting. Let me try it. And then maybe I'll get into it, or I'll pick up a minor, or I'll do data science or something related and such.
Yeah, it's interesting because it can be both the on-ramp at the college level and at the high school level, right? So maybe you'll take CSP in high school, and that might be so CSP is kind of designed to be something that, is college level, but that you don't have to have had prior CS classes for, right? Which is different from something like AP Bio or AP Chemistry, right?
Right.
So you could take AP CSP, and if you liked it, maybe you continue on to AP CSA.
Oh, that's true. Yeah. So I guess for schools that offer both. Because I remember when I took, it was the first year we offered. I wrote a blog post about this. It was the first year our high school offered. I'm going to sneeze once. I'm going to mute the microphone and sneeze. I'll let you talk in a bit. I'll sneeze. It was the first year they offered it for a long time, right? It was Pascal way back in the day. Some older teacher taught it and retired, and our calculus teacher picked it up again. And he went to this like teacher boot camp over the summer, really intensive training to train STEM teachers to do APCS, and it was all in C++. And then it was like it was not very organized, but it was kind of fun because it was very much like early adopters. It was just a few of us, and it was not diverse at all, right? It was basically this uber nerds who really want to do computer stuff, and it was a popular class just because we had fun with it. But I think it's gone a long way in terms of being methodical about thinking about these curricula. So I'm curious to see where that all leads.
Yeah. Do you want to sneeze now?
Yeah, you can keep talking until I sneeze. I'll mute the microphone.
Right. Yeah, I'm very interested to see how whether this leads to a big uptick in CSA, what kind of effect that's going to have on CSA. What's the funnel look like? How many people who take CSP are inclined to keep going, and how many high schools have the teachers for CSA?
Yeah, I didn't think about the CSP to CSA route. So it is sort of mimicking, like we're saying, the CS0 to CS1 in college, right? That you could just take CSA if you want to do pure programming. But if you want to have some gentle on-ramp or try it out, you can do that. I mean, also like high school time is an issue, right? Like students have so many classes packed in that for electives, time is, until they make, they've been talking a lot about this in K-12. It's like, if you can make a programming class mandatory as part of the state or national requirements, that's one of the ways you really get people to take it. Because otherwise, if it's an elective, people have all sorts of choices and teachers may not want to teach it and such.
Yeah. Time is definitely an issue at the high school level. That's why I am always a fan of trying to get it into middle school, because that's when I got started, and I had so much time then and had so much fun programming, and then got to high school and there was just too much stuff to do in high school to really do.
What did you do in middle school for programming? I'm curious about that.
Well, the first thing I made was a web page, of course.
Was this by yourself or is there a class? I mean.
Oh yeah, I never took a class.
Okay, so it was all independent. Okay, cool.
This was all independent. Yeah. Yeah. So I learned how to make web pages, and then I learned how to make Java applets. My parents are programmers, so.
Right, you have an advantage there.
Well, they didn't. I mean, to be fair, I had advantage because I had computers and I had a T1 line.
Well, yeah, that's a big advantage.
Well, it also helped me get friends too.
Right.
So that was the advantage. They didn't actually teach me because my dad said, all the information's on the internet. Go on the internet and you'll find it, right? So I found the Java reference, and yeah, it was on the internet. So that's I think that's part of why I got so into online based information, is because I was very dependent on it, even back in the in the 90s, in order to learn. So I always want to increase the amount of that online information so that anybody who wants to can learn this stuff. And we're at the point now where there's just so much now, which is great.
Yeah, and I think it's a great segue to you're great at segueing podcasts. This is a great segue for Act 2 is talking about just what you were saying about your thoughts about online resources and learning programming. Since there's so much stuff out there, there's an explosion of stuff. How do we sift through it? How do we help people on board? It's an explosion, right? There's so much stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's true. And, given that we have so much stuff, but we also still have people that aren't using that stuff and that need additional social support for using it. So it's not, we can't just have the stuff. Having classes and having clubs or camps and all that sort of stuff, things that give people a social reason and support. Because this is what I always say with, programming, is that it's not necessarily easy, but it is very learnable in that the information is there. The help is there if you know where to find it. So if you keep going, you keep practicing, you can learn it, versus something that might be more obscure or have harder to find, information for it.
That's right. And also, once you're able to solve it, it makes sense, right? Someone can explain it to you. Like, it's not some magical thing, but it's just getting there is it could be a lot of work. Yeah.
Yeah. So so it's great. I love creating online resources, and it's great when people independently discover those and are able to work through it on their own. But it's also really helpful when people create organizations that support each other in learning. For people that are older, and you've looked into research on older folks learning program. If you're older, it can be intimidating because you can think to yourself, oh, maybe I'm too old to learn this, or I was supposed to learn it earlier, or something like that. So it's useful to have a support community there. And if you're younger, it can feel hard too, because it is tricky, right? So you want support for all the different levels of people learning how to program.
Yeah, I think the in-person, the stuff that doesn't scale is a lot of the missing link, right? Like the people who are going to be able to, the people like yourself growing up who had the know-how to go search online and had computers at home and had a T1 line could, you could grab and free time and grab that stuff. But like for a lot of young people, I mean, people of any age, like that, they just don't have the context of where to start. I made a lot of videos, just kind of vlogs about this idea that this knowledge, even though it's all out there in theory, it's not as accessible to people as it could be, just because they don't even think to start searching, or they don't know the structure of how do you take an online course, or how do you follow a tutorial, how do you install these things. And oftentimes it's as simple as somebody guiding them, but where do you find this person? Is it after school? Is it during school? Is it a older relative? It's hard. And you've done teaching in a variety of settings, I guess, maybe talking a bit about that in-person support would be cool.
Yeah. So, I mean, I've done a lot of workshops in the Bay Area for women as part of the Girl Develop It. I've also, like last year, volunteered at the high school. I really like the TEALS program, so plug for that. If you're a software engineer, you can go and volunteer, a day or more a week and help out in a local computer science classroom at a high school. So that's really interesting as well. You get to see the high school experience and help a high school teacher learn computer science. And then, middle schools, elementary schools, clubs. There's such a variety of ways that
you've done stuff with adult and K-12 then, right? Or do you think you focus more on one or the other?
I go all over the place. There's a ton of, we started Girl Develop It because there were a lot of women in the Bay Area that wanted to get into the tech industry. And back then, that was actually when we started the San Francisco chapter, that was before boot camps were really a thing.
Wow. So there was a need for that. That was on that.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's interesting because these days, I think they have a different audience that's coming to the Girl Develop It workshops. Like maybe they're coming as a way to decide whether to go into a boot camp. Maybe they're coming to complement a boot camp. But the boot camp model has really helped out with the audience of adults that are interested in getting into it.
Yeah, now it's so much more mainstream, right? The boot camp model and this more lightweight model and such is it's way more mainstream. Because like before, it's like if you didn't major in this in college, and then you're over 21, 22 years old, like what do you do, right? You even before the MOOCs came up, like unless you knew somebody, like there's really hard to break into the tech industry. And both of the MOOCs and the boot camps and these resources, it's really opened the doors more.
Right. And the boot camps, when someone's deciding between online learning and boot camps, people can definitely do it with online learning. My partner is actually a self-taught programmer, and he liked HackerRank. He really liked HackerRank as a way of upping his Python skills. And so he's managed to move into it without needing a boot camp. But for many people, I would recommend a boot camp because they're also going to help you with the whole job part, like figuring out what is an appropriate job for you at your level. What is interviewing like? What are some companies that we can connect you with that would have the more junior level positions? So I think that the boot camp does have an advantage over MOOCs there in that they want to get you into a job. So that's part of why I've tended to, shift more to the K-12 audience now. And also just because Khan Academy is very specifically focused on K-12 now. We do have a lot of lifelong learners and adult learners, but we're really interested in K-12 and have shifted our focus there. So that's what I tend to think about a bit more now.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. That especially with these alignment with, say, like SATs and APs, there is a structure there that, the lifelong, all the videos and stuff you can put online, and it's great for enrichment for people, but like, something like helping more people be able to succeed on standardized exams and AP exams and try to get into college and those things like that, that's a lot more, there's a lot more structure behind that.
Yeah, I will say it makes it much easier to decide what to prioritize. Like if you say my goal is to teach people programming, that could mean so many things. What language, what environment, what level, are they trying to get a job, right? There's just a huge range of things that you could teach. And it's really overwhelming to try and figure out, okay, this is what we're going to do next, right? But when we say, okay, now our focus is on K-12 students and even more specifically, K-12 students in classrooms. So what is the way that we can support teachers? So then that makes it much easier to decide what to do. So for computer science, I looked at the CS K-12 market and said the biggest way that we support teachers right now is to help their students prepare for the AP CSP exam, because there was all these great curricula with classroom activities, but not a lot of review materials for the exam.
Got it. That's interesting.
So that's where I realized, okay, this is something that all teachers are going to be happy to have a resource like this. This complements their classroom offering well.
Yeah, and it makes their lives easier because, by the time April and May roll around, that's the big thing on students' minds, right? It's like, test prep.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So it makes it much easier to prioritize things from a product perspective.
Yeah, I think that clarity is nice. This is not just for product management, but like just in general of, finding these goals that, that hopefully are aligned with your bigger mission, but they have this concreteness to it rather than, so, that makes a lot of sense. And, that the K-12 stuff makes a lot of sense there because it's something that's very, very concrete and measurable in that way.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. Yes, I'm fascinated by. So when did you go back to Khan Academy? Because you were there for a while, and then you left, and then you're back. And what's the timeline?
So I left, I guess, 3 years ago or so, and then did a variety of things in between, like Burning Man art projects, and I was a CTO of a chatbot and all these sorts of things. And then I came back last June. And originally I was coming back just to do maintenance on my existing programming courses. But then they said, we'll take a look at the CS K-12 market and see if there's something that we can do there. So I did, and I saw CSP and I saw, wow, CSP is really popular now. Because I remembered from before when they were just talking about it as an idea, and now it's been out for a few years, so we can really see like, okay, this thing is taking off, right? So I said, okay, this looks like it'd be a great thing for teachers and students. So I started working on that, and I've been working since August, and released it a few weeks ago.
And that's the primary focus. It's like a primary focus for the past, I guess, 9 months or so is CSP.
Yeah. It was, there's a lot of content. So what I've been doing is articles and exercises. And this is actually my first time really doing something that's kind of exam focused. In the past, I did more programming courses. So yeah, there was a lot. CSP covers internet protocols. So I was doing things like researching TCP/IP and TLS, and I was doing packet sniffing to try and really understand how packets get sent across the internet,
Well, you
right?
should live stream all of this. It would have been amazing, right? Your year of diving in and learning about all this stuff so you could make the materials. That'd been awesome.
Yeah, it was fascinating. I mean, I just uncovered so many interesting things while doing it, right? So we had the internet protocols, then there's the computers of like compression algorithms, logic gates, logic circuits, like, that took me back to electroengineering class. Then we had algorithms. So I got to research things like undecidable problems, which I don't even think that I learned in college. So there are a few topics that actually I don't think I ever happened to touch in my college computer science major. So it was really, really fun to research that huge range of topics so that I could understand them and then turn them into content.
Yeah, I mean that like level of focus is something that's so rare, especially, when you're in a more mid or senior level position. Like that is something cool that like, this very vertical slicing of like we're just going to do CSP and just really focus on that, because a lot of these sorts of content creation or product management or even mid to senior level engineering jobs you're scattered, right? You have a team and you have a mission, but then you're in a meeting about this and you're doing this and you're coordinating with these people about that, and you're kind of all herding the cats to move along. But it's just, now I'm jealous that you got to have that really that focus time.
Yeah, I mean, I'm still involved in content-wide initiatives, and I still do engineering improvements when there's bugs with the programming platform. And I kind of like having the scatter, because sometimes it's really exhausting. It's very exhausting to do 12 multiple choice questions in a day.
Yeah. Oh, I can imagine. It's like, it does feel like a grind, because that's the only thing you're sitting and thinking about. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm just sitting there staring at the wall, trying to come up with, some sort of interesting context for the next question, and just randomly searching for anything that might inspire me. So in cases like that, it's nice to take a break and just code something. So I really like
or maintain stuff or fix a bug,
Yeah, fix a bug. Yeah. So that's the way I relax.
Maintenance. Yeah.
Fixing a bug, sending a diff, that sort of thing.
Yeah. If only everyone liked maintenance and bug fixing as much. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because it's this is amazing to live stream your whole process. I mean, like, it's funny because people who do art, do live streaming. They do gaming, they do live streaming. People who are doing Photoshop or 3D art or 3D design. But like, I actually haven't thought about educators live streaming that way. Right? It's like coming up with exam questions or coming up with exercises. That process is so it's tough. And
I don't know if that would be an exciting live stream.
Yeah, I don't know either. Yeah, because so much goes on your head, right? So you're just writing a few words and then you're correcting it because all that's in your head, I guess.
I mean, for when I'm doing the articles, I'm typically opening up like 20 tabs. So I have, I'm looking at the different curricula that are out there to see how they address a topic. So I take all that in, and then I'm, looking at the technical reference material, right? So, and then I'm looking at the college level material, right? So take everything in, do a weighted average, and then of course look at the standards. So it's a lot of absorbing at the beginning, and then walk away and synthesize.
Yeah, that's a lot of like when I hear sci-fi authors write these really people like Neil Stephenson and and people who write really intricate historical or science-based books, they have all these references open, they have these notes, and it's like to get themselves to write a page is even hard because a lot of this stuff is very dense and they want to cross-reference the story and everything. It's way harder than just like writing a random blog post about something on your mind.
Yeah, let's say I've never written a book because it's too intimidating to me that you would put a book out there and then you wouldn't get to revise it. And it also just feels wrong to write a book about things that go out of date easily, like computer stuff. So I've never actually written a book. I have huge admiration for those people who do actually write books because it means you have to get something to the level where you're so happy with it that you're willing for it to be on print and for you not be able to change that. And that to me seems very nerve-wracking. So I like part of why I like making online curriculum is that I can iterate on it. So, after this podcast, I'll probably run another query on the database to see if I have any additional reports from users about the exercise questions, and then iterate on those exercise questions.
Yeah, that's really nice. Yeah, I mean, this idea that once you have enough users that you have constant feedback about this stuff, and you can, I mean, they are your testers in a way.
Yeah, it's really great because you can see for the exercise questions, there's already been thousands and thousands of attempts per question. So I can look at each of the questions and see what's the median time that they're taking to answer it. And I can look at that across all the questions in a set and see if one of them is particularly hard for some reason or particularly easy. And then I can look to see what answers they're putting in and see like what are the common misconceptions here. And then I can add additional feedback to people who have that common misconception.
And these are multiple choice.
For the most part, they're multiple choice. So it might be like choose one answer, choose two answers. It could be a choose all answers. I do have some other widgets that I use. Like we have a sorting widget. So sorting hexadecimal values.
So it's multi, yeah.
Yeah. But there's issues with that in that it's harder to give feedback and it's harder for them to be accessible.
Yep.
So we are increasingly moving away from the fancy widgets, even though they're quite fun.
Yeah, I mean, multiple choice when done well could be really good. I mean, if it's hard to design good ones, but if done well, it's very good, right? It's very scalable, it's accessible and such, but it's hard to make and maintain good questions.
Yeah, I would love, ideally with all of these multiple choice questions, I would first have the option to ask it as a free text question and see what people would respond with.
Interesting.
And then make it into multiple choice. That's something that's different about making the APCSP course, is that in the past, I've always given the curriculum in person first.
I see. So you can test out, see what people have questions. Yeah. So you have the closer.
So you kind of develop this. Yeah. So this time I was putting out content that I haven't taught before. So I don't actually have an intuition for what sort of things a student might say if they were asked it, with free text.
That's true, because you have not taught an APCSP class.
No, I haven't. I did actually co-teach a CSA class last year.
Oh, cool.
Because I was kind of betting my money on that being the next thing for Khan Academy. But then when I looked at the numbers, like, oh no, we have to do CSP.
Yeah, and I think that makes a lot of sense, because it's also something where, not many people are addressing this, right? That's I'm thinking about what other organization or people are going to be able to make that sort of content, right? Like individual teachers don't have the time to, or the resources, and people at companies probably don't. And maybe code.org might do, and they have their curriculum, but there aren't many places like Khan Academy who are positioned to do something like that.
Right. I will say College Board is actually doing something like this.
Oh,
so
interesting.
College Board is coming out with something called the Question Bank.
Oh, cool.
And for some of the APs, it is going to have thousands of questions because the APs have been around for so long.
Right. So they're just using historical, like for other exams that are historical.
I think they're using historical. They're probably also adding some extra ones. I'm not positive. But yeah, and teachers will be able to, I think they can select sets of questions. They can assign it to their students. So I think, once that comes out, the use case I see is that students can use Khan Academy to practice as they're, trying to see if they get something. And then teachers can use the College Board questions as tests, quizzes, right? The things that are actually graded. That would be the use case I would see, although I think that College Board doesn't like them being used as tests. So I don't quote me on anything College Board.
Yeah, I'm not. Yeah, nobody from the College Board will watch this. We'll make sure we'll block this from all College Board IP addresses.
They've been great. I just don't want to speak on their behalf.
Yeah. This is all unofficial. Everything on this podcast is unofficial. We have a few minutes left. I mean, what broader thoughts do you have, or questions that we could go over? I mean, I don't really have much structure behind this. We just have a few more minutes.
Yeah, well, I mean, so I think the interesting thing that we have to figure out next for Khan Academy is what to teach next. And that's interesting to figure out what language to teach next. Or or what environment to teach next. So I'm currently thinking a lot about Python. Python has kind of kept its popularity over the years and is now something like what the number. So it's, if you look at the Stack Overflow survey, you see JavaScript, HTML, SQL, Python, Java. That's what you see, right? So, and Python is actually a very newbie friendly language as well. So obviously you like Python because you have Python.
Yeah, and there's Mozilla came out with this. So what is like Pyodide? I mean, did you see they had this this environment where they compiled the real Python interpreter and the scientific stack and the data science stack to like run in the browser, and it's it's a big download, right? But you go to the web page and it's all compiled to JavaScript or WebAssembly.
Really?
And if you wait a minute, I'll send the link out.
Okay, I was actually just researching Python in the browser the other day.
Yeah, let me just send you the link, and then we can talk about this offline.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it's quite impressive, and they have a demo, and this could be the at least for learning, this is one of the environments, right? I mean, there was also server ones, right? There's Replit and Python.
Right, but server ones don't scale.
Exactly. So this is completely in the browser. This is what's impressive. That as long as someone can get online and download this, it's just as if they're running a JavaScript environment, except it's Python. You can check out the link. So this could be a game changer in terms of these environments, because you don't have to maintain a server. It's just like the processing JS environment, right? It's like as long as they can download a JavaScript file, they're good in the browser.
Right. Yeah. Okay. So that's very cool. Yeah, that's the kind of thing I've been thinking about. That we want Python in the browser. We want it to be Python 3. And yeah, bonus if we can do I assume
data science stack. And there's also this thing called Sculpt. That's what Brad Miller uses.
That's Python 2.
It is. Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's kind of old too. It's a much older.
Yeah. Yeah. So that, I mean, those are details, but my general thought is if we can get a Python environment going on Khan Academy, and I don't know that we can because we don't actually have engineering resources besides myself,
right.
And maybe I can do it, but we'll see. But if we can, I'd want to use Python in a few ways, because we use Python for data science, which is really cool, but we can also use Python for language processing. And one thing I've observed generally is that we don't have a lot of newbie-friendly curriculum that focuses on the use case of language processing, right? This is something I was talking about with some middle school teachers, because
like text processing in particular,
text processing.
An essay or whatever, Shakespeare or whatever.
Right, like just doing interesting things like, what's the most popular word in a Shakespeare thing?
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
Right. So that way you can integrate it, like you can appeal to people that are like thinking more about words. Because if you think about it, like our newbie friendly stuff, we have a lot of stuff that focuses on art and animation, on games, and we also of course have things that focus on more math and numbers and data crunching.
Towers of Hanoi, more Towers of Hanoi. Fibonacci and Towers of Hanoi with recursion.
Yeah, so we have all of that covered, but I feel like we're missing, in terms of like diversity of the ways you can use programming and the sort of things that people are interested in. I feel like we're missing the use case of I'm somebody who loves words and wants to manipulate words.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's a great insight. I really like that.
Yeah, because then I'm thinking, you can potentially bring it into an English classroom, right?
Yeah, that was one of the dreams of folks. I mean, people in CS education have talked about these dreams for many years, but I'm excited now because it's people like you who can help realize these, right? So like people have talked about digital humanities and like using computation for the liberal arts and humanities and such. But like I feel like my take on as an observer is that a lot of people who talk about that, they're not the ones with the technical abilities to implement these systems, right? That they're like, this would be great. I mean, they're educators, they are, maybe CS people, but they're not the ones on the ground, looking at Sculpt and Iodide and Mozilla's WebAssembly or whatever. So like, and then the people who are looking into that, they're not as interested in the K-12 education, the broadening out. So that really leaves, one person, which is you, to do this. Basically, it just leaves you.
There's various people, but I think it would be cool to, because when we talk about diversity, like there's so many different ways you can use programming, and ideally, we would be able to target all people. Like, I'm fully aware that the JavaScript course that we have right now on Khan Academy does not appeal to all people because it's JavaScript plus processing JS. So you have to like making drawing and animation. And lots of people like that, but also lots of people aren't particularly into it or even actively discouraged by it because they don't like how their output looks, right?
Yeah, that's totally true. Yeah, I mean, the thing with the drawing thing is that, it's hard to make something that looks awesome, right? So if you're not okay with that, then you'll be like, oh, I can't make anything awesome looking, like, after a while.
Yeah, people have huge complexes about drawing. I discover this
Yeah.
every time I try to do drawing games with my friends, and they're like, no, I don't want to draw. It'll be embarrassing. I'm like, it's so fun.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
people have complexes around that. So ideally we would just have things that appeal to different audiences, and also if we talk about the K-12 level, could be integrated, into different middle school classes, right? So some like a module with data science that you could work into a science class in one of those semesters where you're doing a ton of experiments and data gathering, right? But then you could have a module with words that you integrate into a language arts class where you're analyzing Shakespeare and then doing a Markov chain to generate new Shakespeare text, right?
Yeah, I think this Pyodai thing it could be really promising. I mean, I haven't played around with it much beyond just looking at the blog posts and the thing, but like, there's two approaches, right? One is, if you want to stick with Python and that stack to go with this, or the other one is, JavaScript stacks are becoming very good now. I mean, with things like observable notebooks and like, all the data visualization job. I mean, the JavaScript and modern JavaScript is really, I mean, just going all in JavaScript you could do very similar things too.
That's true. I do have a concern with JavaScript that is getting increasingly less newbie friendly. Now that we're at ECMAScript 6, there's so many constructs in the language. So
that's true. Yeah, and then there's a lot of mixed code, right? There's some older looking code and newer looking code, and people get really confused. Like, what is this code? Yeah, but when I'm teaching ES6 for classes, I teach, I look at style guides, and I have a curriculum that's like, we're looking at modern style guides, and here's a style guide we're going to teach, But I'm like, if you're going to look on Stack Overflow or wherever, you're going to see code with var and code with like weird, older syntax, and just it's fine. But I totally understand that, for if you're just teaching Python 3, at least it's somewhat unified. Yeah.
Yeah, I think we could teach either, and we can figure out ways to teach it. But if you also just think about in terms of teachers and what languages teachers are going to be attracted to, if you look between Python and JavaScript, I think that Python looks a lot more teachable and learnable.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, I mean, just the more minimalist syntax and everything. Yeah, that's really fascinating. And I'm just curious about the AP CSA world with Java. And it seems like a whole parallel universe, right? I guess it's legacy from the old days because, we're talking about all this new developments. I'm wondering, is there a podcast out there for people who are die-hard Java AP CSA fans?
Yeah. So yeah, CSA is interesting. There are some folks that would love if CSA was taught in a different language like Python. But it's hard for the College Board, right? Because if the College Board has to change their exam every time, a language.
No, that's crazy. Yeah, it's too much. Yeah.
It's not going to work. So, so I think there could be some future where the College Board, like maybe in a few years, they'll start thinking about that. There could be some future where they change the language like they have in the past. But for the meantime, it is Java. I thought we had a lot of fun with it actually when we used it.
Yeah, I think it's fine. I mean, I think it's aged pretty well, and all these object-oriented programming they transfer over to other things in the software engineering type of concept. I think it's fine. I have nothing against it. So I was the last year they did. I think I was the second last year they did C++. I think Java started 2001, maybe 2002, around then.
Yeah. So I think the concepts are nice. That the only thing is that there's less and less places for you to take the knowledge that's useful, right? So the nice thing about Python is that if you do happen to learn Python in a class, you now have a lot of different use cases for it, right? If you want to make games, you could use Pygame, and if you wanted to do web stuff, you could make a Flask app. Whereas with Java, we still definitely use Java, fairly a lot in the industry, but it's just there's not as many use cases for it anymore, right? We're not making Java applets anymore, sadly, even though that was so fun.
Yeah, it actually worked pretty well, right? For its use case of being able to run something in a browser, it actually worked. Yeah.
Yeah, and we're increasingly, you can use Java to make Android apps, but in the US, that's not as popular of a thing
Right.
to do.
Right.
A lot of people like to use their iPhones. So it doesn't, it definitely, I mean, if you take CSA and you understand Java well, then that's great. You are going to be well set up to learn another language. It just might be that you will immediately want to learn another language because you won't be able to do what you want to do with Java in the ideal world.
Yeah, and I guess a parting thought here, what you reminded me of is that it would have been awesome. I mean, whatever language, regardless of whatever language, let's say Python, since you mentioned it's like it would be awesome to have some kind of, I would say book in quotes because it's, books now are online, and something that's, there's so many CS1 type books, right? Like introductory Python, introductory Java or JavaScript. It'd be awesome to have something that's like a little bit more, but it's like for the more advanced learners who are like, okay, I know some basics now. Show me like 5 different paths you can do. So there's a data science path, a web app building path, a games path, a embedded computing or Arduino or Raspberry Pi, and like, that would be a cool resource, right? That level I haven't really seen.
Yeah, that would be really nice. It actually reminds me of what happens in the AP classes after the exam, right?
Cool.
After the exam, that's when you get to explore different things. So for CSA, they put in a lot of effort preparing for that exam and learning a lot of new things right before it. So for after the exam, I wanted to show them the different ways that you could use programming. And so I brought in a game developer, I brought in a mobile developer.
Oh, wow.
And I talked about web development. And then we went into processing. Because of course, processing was originally written in Java, right?
Right.
And we had a lot of fun with processing, right? So you can imagine, like ideally for CSA, you would have all those paths for the last, month, whatever it is, like month and a half in the classroom of, they spent the last many months acquiring this Java knowledge. What are some cool ways that they could put that knowledge to work?
I mean, I think it's great. I mean, not every classroom has someone like you coming in as well, right? So it's like if you're a teacher and you don't have somebody who has the connections to industry and can bring in people with expertise and such, what do we do? Because it's already hard for teachers to learn all the core material. Like, I don't think a APCS teacher would know how to do all the data science and the gaming and all the processing and stuff. So maybe more resources there would help.
That's why I recommend TEALS once again. So if you're listening and you're a software engineer, sign up. Because in the CSP classroom, they had a TEALS volunteer from Pixar. And so they got to learn Blender for the last few weeks.
Oh, wow. That is awesome. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's the thing is that, I think that's this really cool thing that people can bring in and say like, here, here's an example of this thing that I know that I can share with you. So I think TEALS helps a lot with that. But also there is a lot of training available for CS teachers, and there are communities. I'm in the Facebook CSP teachers group, and there's a ton of people posting right now things like, hey, I just got a bunch of Raspberry Pis. What curriculum can I use?
Awesome.
I just got Swift installed. I just got a bunch of Spheros robots. So people are supporting each other, and I see mentions of training and curriculum and that sort of thing. So yeah, it's true that it helps to come from the industry, but there's a ton of resources out there, and if we have a way to connect people with them, and then we can bring those resources to more classrooms.
Yeah, that's an awesome note to end on, because now you mentioned this idea that the teachers have this community, right? So when people talk about CS education research, there's a big emphasis on students, obviously, but there's also a secondary emphasis on teachers, right? How do you develop teacher training? How do you help teachers become better at teaching? How do you, and the last thing you mentioned is how do you foster a community of practice of teachers?
Mm-hmm.
And we talk about this in computing a lot because at first, at least when I started out thinking about this, there weren't many CS teachers. So building up the community was hard. So hopefully now with these online groups, they could find more of that support.
Yeah, communities practice. I actually went to a community of practice last week with middle school teachers. And that's cool because community of practice, actually anyone can go to that. So they could be a parent of a CS student, it could be a CS student, it could be a local engineer. So
Oh, cool.
that's another thing that that people could potentially get involved with if they're interested in CS education.
Yeah, y'all should just live stream all the meetings. It'd be awesome. Yeah, I know not everyone wants to be live streamed, but I'm like, these meetings, these meetups would be amazing because then like other people can tune in and watch and be like, wow, I didn't know that you could do this. But yeah, I know not everyone wants to be 24/7 live streamed.
Well, we actually did have that one live streamed.
Oh, awesome. Oh, great.
Yeah,
Okay.
we had a middle school teacher join who's also the one working on the CSTA standards, the computer science.
Oh, wow, that's big.
K-12 standards. So she had a lot of interesting things to say about what are the strategies for getting CS in at the middle school level.
Yeah, so it seems like that middle school push is the next frontier.
Yeah, I think it's just going to be less obvious how to do it, and there's going to be more strategies. The general thing I kept hearing from that meeting is that people wanting to finding ways of putting it into existing classes.
Yeah. Again, because time is limited and such. Yeah, time and because middle school is only 2 or 3 years at most places, and they already packed.
I think it's both that time is limited, but also maybe just that it could enhance an existing class.
Right.
Like if you have a social studies class, like somebody was talking about, like, okay, you have a social studies class and you talk about the invention of the telegraph and the effect that that had. Could you then also have people reflect on the invention of the smartphone and the effect that that has had, right? So you can imagine, like, maybe there's ways of actually enhancing existing classes by connecting it with modern computing innovations in a way that it keeps people really engaged, right? Because people are using computers. These students are using computers every day. They're seeing the effects of it. So maybe it's a potential way of actually making something more engaging.
Yeah, that's a really optimistic take on it. Yeah, I mean, my take was, oh my gosh, like how are we actually going to get this in the schools? Because teachers are strapped, we don't have time. But but your view is very Star Trek futuristic of this will enhance our actual curriculum. Yeah, I have to run like 1 minute, but like I made some vlogs recently where I just walked around my middle and my high school and I just like peeked into the classrooms and it's like, it's all just like projectors and, people, I didn't see it during school, but I imagine like everyone has their laptops or, devices. It's probably so different than, 20 years ago when there were no devices in schools, right?
Yeah. So ideally we figure out a way to make them be, really active users of those computing devices and not so passive. That would be the general goal of computing education for me.
Yeah, well, that was a great note to end on. Well, thank you so much, and I'll post this up soon.
All right, awesome.
All right, thank you so much. See ya.
Thank you. Bye.